Good afternoon, it's Joyful Hermit. Well, I came across a couple of saints. They have a point, and it has to do with forgiveness and with suffering. And one of them is, well, it was I guess I'll mention him later. This one was a saint, her celebration day is April 18th, just passed a few days ago, and her name, she was born as Esther Blondin, Blondin, in Quebec, or in an outskirt village of Quebec, Canada. It was called something else back in 1809 when she was born. Had a different name, but it's now the city of Quebec. And she was born a very poor farmer family, but strong Christians. They were very strong Christians. And she developed gifts of piety from one parent and other holy aspects from another parent, and but she was totally illiterate, could not read or write. Back then in Canada, they had no schools. The churches had the schools, and most dioceses did not bother with them. Most priests didn't for their parishes, because there was a rule in the Catholic Church back then that girls could not be taught by men and boys could not be taught by women. See, there's probably some canon law. So that's how, humankind, we start developing and wanting to have these rules, make up these laws. And at the time, maybe they thought it made sense, but the parishes, they didn't have money to hire two different teachers, or for different grades, even four different teachers, say, if they had early grades and higher grades. And some teacher had to teach maybe four or five grades, but they couldn't hire all those people. So rather than just teach the boys or just teach the girls, which some parishes decided they would just teach the boys, but then parents were upset because the girls weren't taught. So they just didn't have school at all. And that was Esther's problem, why she wasn't educated. But when she was, I think, about 18, at least 18, maybe a little older, she went to work as a domestic for a convent there. I think it was something to do with Notre Dame. A religious order that was dedicated to Notre Dame, Our Lady. And she was a domestic there working for a fee. And I think it was maybe she worked there a couple of years and became keenly interested in learning to read and write. And they happened to have to teach that there. They had a school. And so she was able to go to that school to learn to read and write. I think it was a year that she had to learn. And she was obviously a bright person, and she learned and learned well. Then in 1854, she was born in, 1848, she was born in 1809. So I think she continued to work. She briefly joined the Congregation of Notre Dame, but had to leave due to ill health. She became ill. They don't say what it was. But so in 1848, though, she had this inspiration of the Holy Spirit to teach the poor children and to start a school for the poor children, poor like she had been. And she was poor then still. So I'm trying to say 1848, how old would she have been? 48. She was in her late 30s then, about 39, if I have that correct. And so she had this idea, went to her bishop and presented it. And he felt under pressure because the government at that time was wanting the school, wanting everyone to be educated, wanting children to be educated, not just the wealthy who could send their children to boarding schools or pay. So under pressure, he agreed to let her teach. So I think she taught girls, and she might have also found someone to teach boys, but at least she did the girls. And she even had an idea to start an order, a community to teach children, a community of teachers. And women thronged to it. It grew and grew rapidly. So that was very successful. Well, in 1854, this was 6 years later, or maybe it was in 1853, the bishop transferred the mother house of her community to another location in his diocese. And somebody had donated a place they could stay because it was growing. They needed room for all these women who were teachers in this religious order, in this teaching religious order. And also to have the school, and they had boarding for the poor children to come and live there while they were getting educated. And so she was transferred, and he had a chaplain assigned in this new location, a Father Marichal. And he was nothing but trouble. He got involved in the inner workings, the private lives of the sisters and of the school, the private workings of it. And for a short while, and she was called Mother Marie Anne. That was her religious name, Mother Marie Anne, since she was the superior. Very popular woman. She was the foundress and the first superior. And it was still growing, which of course, if you've been in any organization where is someone overseeing, and it can be gender change too, like a man with women, there can become resentments and envy, and it just depends on the person who becomes envious because they want power then. Usually somebody who's envious of someone else wants what they have, and it's usually connected to something to do with some kind of power, special gifts or special talents or wealth or status, prestige, positions, possessions, all privileges and power. So this priest didn't like Mother Marie Anne, and he worked with the bishop, somehow got her removed for a while, but then she came back, and then he would leave. But while she was gone briefly, he started charging boarding fees for these children, charging their parents. Of course, the parents wanted their children to be educated. They wanted them to have a better life than what they had. So they would come up with the money, or some of the children couldn't stay. But who knows what the priest did with the money? But he charged them. So she got back, did not like that. There was controversy. And the priest then also went to the bishop and told him that she was mismanaging. She was not a good educator, and that she was not organized or leading properly, and that everything was a mess, and convinced this bishop that she shouldn't be in charge. And the bishop didn't have enough input or check with her, or have someone go, an educator go and supervise to see. No regulator was involved. So the bishop forced her to resign from being superior. And it was just awful what she went through with this Father Marichal. So she was out. She was out. That was it. And I will say it reminded me of my soup kitchen fiasco. It's hard. It's hard when the Holy Spirit, or in my case, the Virgin Mary, was the one that told me how to do the soup kitchen and how to set it up and how to deliver to the people, and that it was to be for anyone who needed a touch of love, and etc., etc. And then I was out. A priest became envious he felt that I had power when of course I didn't. I was not into that, but these things happen. So there was Mother Anne Marie, Mother Marie Anne. She was not allowed to, no one was to call her mother anymore. She was no longer the superior. She wasn't ever to be referred to as the foundress. When it was through the Holy Spirit that she did found the order, the community, and the teaching of all these children. And the women loved her. And when they would have new elections, she was ordered. This Father Marichal was tricky. Tricks of the devil in him. And so he would work it out. The bishop then would tell her that even if she were elected back to being superior, she was to refuse it. Well, Mother Marie Anne, or Marie Anne, born as Esther, her name Esther, but went by Marie Anne, she complied fully, quietly. For one thing, she did not want the children to be stopped being taught if the community were disbanded. Now, the bishop didn't want that, and neither did this Father Marichal. By then, it was growing. The community was large. It was a community of St. Anne, the Order of St. Anne, it was called. And it was just horrific, though, just the ugliness that went on over a period of a few years at first, but then it was maybe just within a year that she was out. But she eventually then was sent to be down in the basement of this convent to do the laundry. She was down in a room in a basement, a cellar, no windows, doing all the laundry for all of the religious sisters who were teaching these children, and probably did the laundry for the boarding students. And it was no longer under her supervision or her growth, but she did not want it to fail. She stayed down in the basement and did this by hand, probably had the scrub board laundry. And she was never to talk about how she had been foundress. Others were not supposed to talk about it. She was totally stripped of being even a person, really, because of this priest and the bishop who went along with it, who just listened to the priest and probably felt he had to. You know, the priest's word was going to carry, and the bishop would rely on his priests. It's sort of the pecking order that goes on in any organization. There's a levels of people in charge. And probably her being a woman also, and being gifted and talented, being educated. She learned to read and write, and she was quick enough that she picked it up and became authorized or certified to teach. And she's the one that had this idea of how to work around to provide education for the children, boys and girls, eventually. So that religious community was still growing. She was down in the basement. That was 1854. She died in 1890. That's 46 years. 46 years she was in the basement doing the laundry. And there would be novices who would come, join the order. It's growing, and it continued to grow all through. Children were being educated. I would suspect the whole thing wasn't as good as it would have been without Marie Anne being the foundress and leading them, because even over the years they would hold elections for a superior, and she would still be voted to be the superior, and they would not, she was not allowed to accept it, and she went along with it quietly. She also felt that the bishop was an instrument of God in her life. Now, that's a different attitude than if we think that the bishop is a stand-in for God and that you would obey the bishop because that's as if you're obeying God himself. Some people do have those attitudes of bishops and priests, that you do whatever they say, but that isn't really what was intended by the notion that they are instruments of God. They are instruments of God in our lives. With that thought, it's more that Marie Anne had this understanding that this was happening for a reason that God wanted for her life, for some reason, for her spiritual growth, or for somehow for the community that she herself did not see or know. But she felt that God was using the bishop, even though it was most unkind even and unfair to not take the vote of the sisters that was in their bylaws that they had for the religious order. But she felt that God was using the bishop to prevent her from leading and put her in such a lowly spot, relegated her to the basement, to laundry duty for the rest of her life, that was what God wanted for some reason. And she accepted it as that and felt that the bishop was being an instrument of God. So she kept the bishop, she kept her other person intact, gave him the benefit of the doubt, did not detract him ever, and same with this Father Marichal, who from the get-go was on her, was against her, harassing her, lying about her, trying to get her out. He resented her popularity, resented her ability to think and read and write and lead and teach. She was an excellent teacher. And probably resented that the Holy Spirit had blessed her with such a growing, that became a congregation quickly. That was the idea, was even for a congregation, but how it grew. And the love that the sisters had for her, the respect, he resented all that. He wanted it. That's envy. He wanted that. He wanted that power. And perhaps there was some gender issue going on. Sexism. A woman wasn't supposed to have that type of appreciation or authority over or leadership skills. So as I'm reading all these things, I'm like, yes, I could feel her pain, but she didn't let on. And when a new novice would come and bring the laundry down, strip the beds, or even all the sisters' clothing, all the laundry was done by Marie Ann. The titleless nothing Marie Ann. But you know how women will talk. Anyone will. But they would hear, well, that woman who's doing the lawn down there in the basement all these years, who's been there forever. The ones that came later. Who's that old lady down? Well, she's the foundress, or she was. It's Marie Ann Blondin. And they would ask her, how can you do this when you were foundress? Her response would be something like, I'm like the plant that is rooted in and grows so that my fruit will be doing this work, and my roots will grow and expand for my soul. It was always some statement of, in fact, it was very clever when I'll find, no, better than how I said it. It was very, very humbled, and let me find it. I took photos of these so I could, of the write-up. Well, she would always say it was for the greater glory of God that she did her work, and that the bishop who had relegated her to this life and this Father Marichal, that they were instruments of God in her life. And what a beautiful, say, win-win she had, because she was not saying those dirty, rotten scoundrels, look what they did. She wasn't acknowledging any of that. She also wasn't saying, no, that they are as God, and I'm obeying them because they are as God to me. No. But that they are instruments of God. Well, could be a gun. A gun is an instrument of protection or whatever, but also an instrument of killing someone. So it could be that kind of instrument. But she stated it in a way that it was positive, but also reflective on herself, that she felt that God was going to teach her in other ways. And that what I've always said, but I don't remember enough, I'll say it, usually a little late, I'll figure it out, that God chooses these things for me, that he's chosen these things for me, that he has a reason, and that's why he chose these things to happen. So, and some of the times I know what he chose and why, like the car accident. That was what it was going to take for my husband to leave me, was for me to be injured. And that was the tipping of the scale, that he no longer had interest. His double life of womanizing wasn't as intriguing to him because I was maimed. I wasn't well, and my back was ruined, and wasn't as exciting to be cheating on someone who is already damaged. So, I figured that out, that accident was a part B of part A that was 2 weeks before this prayer. Use me however you will, however you want. I felt something what obviously wasn't right in the marriage, the way he was acting. We'd been apart for about 9 months, or 10 months more, 10 months at least, when he had taken another job and had me stay back to sell the house, keep on with my job, and because the house didn't sell right away. And then he liked having that freedom with his affairs in other areas. So, see, it all was, he was doing a game, had his cake and eat it, but then when the accident came, that gave him an out for himself, that he was done. He didn't want someone who had a bad back and my neck. I had a collar I had to wear and lots of pain in the spine, and it wasn't fun anymore, cheating on someone who was injured. So that was it. But I could see not far along that God had chosen that means. It had to be something big to get me freed from him. I saw it from that perspective. And my children freed. So God chooses these things. But I didn't think that, and in that sense, my husband was an instrument in God's hands, was an instrument of God to get us apart from each other so that God could utilize me and my children would be freed, and the same with a judge that let us leave the state. The last 3 minutes of court, he saw through what was going on, the ugliness and the volatile temper and the narcissism and the lying of this, and that the children at their ages wouldn't want to be going so much if they had no good reason. And then when the ex-husband ranted about how great he was, the judge saw through and decided. And then when the husband erupted, that was affirmation. Wow, this lady has reason to want to get out, get 2,200 miles away. So the judge was an instrument in God's hand. So it is the right way to view things. But it's not that these people are as God or acting as God. That's different. That's really putting them in the position of God. And I personally think it's not fair to do that to another human being, because they're not. And it can create errors, and it can mislead other people. If we are elevating people in authority positions, or a spouse even, that they are as God, and we are to obey them because they're acting as God. But if they are being used by God as an instrument, that can include things that are hard for us. But if we also see it and know that God's using it, and she had that sense, evidently, that trust, that her being in the laundry room was as an instrument, was what God wanted for her life, not as the leader. Who knows, maybe she was being tempted to feel too good about herself or something as the leader, as the foundress, and the way it was growing so rapidly. I doubt it, because she seems like a very humble woman. But that's what she felt and would say that she obeyed because the bishop, she agreed to resign. She agreed not to accept every time, even years later, they would still vote for her. Bring her out of the laundry room. We want her as our superior. But she would refuse. The bishop had asked her to, ordered her to, but she viewed that he was an instrument of God, and that for her soul, God was going to teach her more in the lowly position. That was the attitude she chose to have. So she would say, like if a novice would ask her, why are you down here? Why do they keep you aside for such lowly work? She would simply reply with kindness. With kindness, it says, the deeper a tree sinks its roots into the soil, the greater are its chances of growing and producing fruit. So even that is more humble than the way I expressed it, that the greater are its chances of producing fruit. She wasn't boasting. I've sunk my roots down in, and I have produced great fruit, She was very wise, very humble. Well, she had hours alone down there, scrubbing away, thinking about it. You can imagine what her fingers were like in the cold winters of Quebec, and that area of Canada. It gets cold, and her hands were probably raw. And harsh soaps they would use, lye and things to LYE, to clean, to sanitize and clean. But yeah, she would be down in her, it was actually in Lachine in Canada, town, but in that province. So other things that she would, despite the hardships of her life and of the inspiration the Holy Spirit gave her to start this, she only sought God's glory in all she did. The greater glory of God was the aim she herself gave her community when she founded it. That was like their motto. The greater glory of God was their aim. Also, to make God known to the young who have not had the happiness of knowing Him. That was for her a privileged way of working for the glory of God. Says here, deprived of her most legitimate rights and robbed of all her personal letters with her bishop. She would write to the bishop. Probably a wealth of wisdom and spiritual development in someone who was in solitude, washing clothes all day, long days, in the basement. But she was robbed of those letters. She offered no resistance to things, and she expected from the infinite goodness of God the solution to the matter. Well, she would write to the bishop, hoping to, obviously, to get some of her rights back, but she was convinced that God would be the solution to the matter, to anything that she wrote, or if she would hear of things going that weren't right, that were happening to novices, or to with this Father Marichal, who persisted longer than she lived. She lived to 81. He outlived her. Well, he might have been younger when this all started, but she was always convinced that God will know well in His wisdom how to discern the false from the true, and to, let me get this to move, please, little phone, reward each one according to his deeds. So she kept the spiritual ideal and the positive ideal. She did write to the bishop, but all those letters she was denied access to. They were taken. That's what it was, that they were, she was robbed. They were robbed of her personal letters that she would try to write to get justice, and they would be taken away. And this Father Marichal was behind all that. He was the chaplain there and the overseer. And the bishop trusted him, and he shouldn't have, but he did. She was prevented by being called mother by those in authority. Mother Marie Anne did not jealously hold on to her title of foundress. Rather, she chose annihilation, just like Jesus, the crucified one, her crucified love. And she did it because she wanted the community to live. And there I understood, because behind the scenes, when the soup kitchen was no longer something I was allowed to do, I gave everything over to the volunteers that kept it going. And they could call me to ask questions. And when we were doing a cookbook, and I went ahead and did the cookbook typed it all up, got it all printed, and I collated going around my dining room table. So it's like 200 pages. I went around 200 times because there were 200 books. I don't know how many pages, but maybe not 200 pages, but there were over 200 books, and it was over 100 pages at least, 120 maybe. And then I bound them with my little binding machine I had, and I still to this I had this huge vein in my right leg that popped from the ankle up to my knee. This big, huge, lumpy vein because of the pressure on my foot going around that table. But I wanted the soup kitchen to survive because it was doing so much good. But I obeyed my spiritual father, who said it was only going to be temporary that I wasn't going in. He says the little children need to grow up. And he anticipated that they wouldn't make it without me, because he says you have nothing to do with it for the next 3 weekends. But immediately that weekend, when the priest preached these sermons against me, my spiritual found out, and he says, you're not going back at all. Not until that priest apologizes to you. Well, he never did. And he says, you're not to speak to him until he apologizes to you. And finally, after 2 years, I lived right across the street. The priest said something to me. He never apologized, but he spoke for the first time. He was outside, I was outside. He told me some landscaping I had done looked good. So I've always been keeping busy doing stuff when I can. And so I decided that was at least something, because other times he wouldn't speak at all. And I would look over, or I was available if he wanted to speak, but he wouldn't. So I considered that at least an opener, but he never apologized at all for what he did. But the soup kitchen continued because when I was not to go back at all then, my spiritual dad said, yes, you can help from the sidelines. Help them keep it going, until they get on their feet. And it didn't take long because it was developed well. And it sounds like this woman's religious order was well developed by her. She had good technique because it kept going, but she wanted it to keep going. She did not want any fussing to go on that was going to jeopardize these children being educated and all of this teacher community to be lost. She wanted it to live, to continue. Let me see this for some more ideas. So she lived her life like that all those years. It says here, the attitude of Mother Marie Ann, who was a victim of so many injustices, allows us to bring out the evangelical sense she gave to events in her life. Just as Jesus passionately worked for the glory of his Father, so too Mother Marie Ann sought only God's glory in all she did. Let's see what else. Like any prophet invested with a mission of salvation, Mother Marie Ann survived persecution by forgiving without restriction, convinced that there is more happiness in forgiving than in revenge. Now that's practical. And it's truth. It's hard. It's hard to get to that point, but it's the truth. And it's the gift that we get when we forgive others. We will find more happiness. When we don't forgive others, it will hang over us. Whether or not we move on and think we've forgotten it, there's always going to be that black spot inside us. That little spot, that little tight muscle of that ugly time period that we were in, where someone wronged us, but we refused to forgive. We'll always hold that anger in. And so I thought that was a good statement to remember. I'm trying to get this to... see, there was something else I wanted to read here. Oh, she offered herself to God in order to expiate all the sins which were committed in the community. So she offered herself as a living sacrifice for any of the sins of any of the persons in the community. She daily prayed, asking Saint Anne. She didn't pray to Saint Anne, but she prayed asking Saint Anne to bestow on her spiritual daughters the virtues so necessary for Christian educators. Well, she had a devotion to Saint Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. Why would she ask Saint Anne to help keep the virtues alive in the novices and the sisters? Because Anne obviously taught Mary well with virtues. So just for anybody who might be listening to this video and think Catholics pray to saints, and why would they ask Anne? Why wouldn't she ask Jesus to make sure that these daughters have good virtues? Well, maybe she also asked Jesus that. But Saint Anne was her patron namesake and the name of the community, the patron of the community, because it was the order of Saint Anne, or the community of Saint Anne. And Saint Anne was a wonderful mother to the Virgin Mary. So anyway, I just think these are interesting details for us to keep in mind regarding forgiveness and the attitude to have, to wish well for the others, and to wish success for them, and goodness, and to offer ourselves, if need be. Let's see. We talked about there's more happiness in forgiving than in revenge. This evangelical forgiveness guarantees of the peace of soul, which she held most precious, was ultimately proven on her deathbed when she asked her superior to call for Father Marischal and to be for the edification of the sisters. Well, you know how it would be. Word would have spread and kept going all those years, those 46 years, that she was in the basement as a laundress, except when she was on her deathbed. And they would have known who it was who persecuted her constantly and kept her down, Father Marischal. And to see her asking for Father Marischal to come and do the last rites, what a statement of forgiveness that made to all of the sisters. Her example. And that's something that I need to remember. And if you all are into all this forgiveness stuff, the pray for people, love them, and forgive them, but then keep living our lives. That was the instructions I was given by God, the Holy Spirit, last fall in my own life. And it's helped me immensely. But it's still hard. It's not ingrained in me. It's not automatic. I still have to work at it. The forgiveness part. And then the going on and living my life. And not still be strung up by something awful that's going on. Taken, put in a vice grip by it, or walking on eggshells, or all up in a hoodoo and frozen from doing more work, or exhausted or depleted because of emotional stress. or physical fear, that kind of thing. So I'm still working on it. Or the goal is to transition right in to living our lives, praying for the people who do us wrong, loving them as children of God, if nothing else. And I mean, we don't love their awful behavior to us, but we can honestly then say they are instruments of God in our lives, because by them we can learn great spiritual growth. We can have great spiritual growth, and we can learn great spiritual lessons for our own selves and for the edification of others, to inspire others who likewise go through all kinds of problems at the hands of other people. And so as she felt the end approaching, Mother Marie Ann left to her daughters her spiritual testament in these words, which are a resume of her whole life. May Holy Eucharist and perfect abandonment to God's will be your heaven on earth. And she passed away on January 2nd of 1890, the age of 81. She was happy, this is in quotes, happy to go to the good God. That's what she said, referred to God as the good God. Happy to go to the good God she had served all her life. So I'd written on my, I think it goes out to people who have subscribed. I've been under more duress by the HOA people here. In fact, my neighbor came over yesterday morning and was upset, which is why I have to tell you this. We've got to do something. Would you be willing, let's just get those black planting pots keep it in your truck bed if they can't see them. Keep them low in your truck bed. Or, if I have room, she said, we can put them in my garage. I don't think she really wanted to do that. They have things in their own garage. But she said she says, is there any room in your garage, in my garage? And I said, yes, I'd taken some cabinets out. I think we could get the black pots in the garage. She said, one of the men was out taking photos of my backyard, and my bedroom windows are right here. 3 big windows looking out. And that's, to me, sort of creepy. That some man, the HOA man, is taking photographs. My bedroom windows are right here. That's creepy. Who does that? And then even of the grass, there were little spots where the grass hasn't grown in. I had bill bugs last summer that ate grass. The grass is starting to grow back in. It's not fast enough for these people. And I shouldn't even call them these people. They're the HOA retired volunteers. It's what they are. Give them their title. Respect them. They are instruments of God in my life. They are instruments of God for my betterment. And I see the direct relation with this Sister Marie Ann Blondin and the life that she went through. One thing after another. It wasn't nice how she was treated. Her inspiration from God taken away. But so much good came from it. So much good. She's a saint, for one thing. Her story became known as a witness to others, to us today, on how to handle maltreatment by other human beings, how to have a perspective, a broadened view, and understand to tell ourselves the HOA people are an instrument of God in my life. Well, before I'd read this, I had already been trying it on, because I do it quite a bit, that God chose this for me for some reason. I don't know why. But he's chosen this trial But so the neighbor lady had me. We got all these black pots into the garage, hidden. They were on the side of the house, neatly stacked along. Not many of them. There weren't many, but even the neighbor woman said they've really obsessed over those. It's bugging them terribly because they went to my neighbor trying to get her to turn against me. They wanted her to say that I bothered them, bothered my neighbor. I didn't realize, but when they'd been here before, 3 days prior, this lady came, and I told her. She came 3 times, but I answered the door the final time. And I told her, my neighbors are not bothered. They understand. I'm a work in progress here, and it's getting done. Well, they've already seen the landscaping. That was last summer, and they thought last May and June. I had my surgery June 20th, and that was it for me for the rest of the season, summer and fall. My leg was bad. Still is, but not as bad. As painful, but I use it. I'm getting used to it now. But the neighbors were fine. They knew I was laid up. They knew I'd had bad thing happen with my knee. Bad luck, failed surgery. So they're very patient and very understanding. And I pray to God that they are maybe gained in compassion or see something that if something happens to them, they'll keep pushing to keep going because they see me pushing to try to keep going. They're friendly to me across the street. I mentioned, I have the window, the area that I'm going to work on top because it's supposed to rain again in a couple days. And I need a good 5 days to be able to do the mortar coat on that. So I have to keep it covered until I get a good stretch. And I have my cabinets done, and they're nearly done. So that man, I said, I'm sorry about the tarp, but it'll be down soon. Don't worry about it. That is not bothering us, You're doing great. Just don't worry. He was so emphatic. And but the HOA people were angry with my next door neighbor when she wouldn't turn on me. They were angry with her, put out, because they kept trying. Well, don't these black spots bother you? No, not at all. She's working on it, and will do what she'll do, what she wants and what she needs, and she does the best she can, and I'm starting to get better. This BPC-159. I had a birthday, and my one daughter called me and talked for a long time, expressed love for me, very nice, shared her life, and she's the one that told me about this B as in boy, P as in Paul, C as in coy, -159. It wasn't a couple weeks ago on Amazon. I had to buy it through, I think, Epothex. It's called Epothex, a company online. Well, no, my daughter's paying for them, though. She says, I'm getting these for a mother's birthday gift for you because she's in pro sports, and another player was taking it, and it's having great effect on his joints and ligaments and inner healing. But it's also very good with intestinal troubles. And I did research because it mentions Crohn's disease and things like that. But and I have motility problems. My intestines don't move. But it said in laboratory rats anyway, they've done lab testing. It's not approved by the ADA, but it's all online. Lots of people are taking it, lots of athletes now, because of the good it does for joints and other body ailments. But it did say that it's had positive effect on nerve signals to the intestines for motility. And I've taken them now for 2 weeks this morning, in fact. What I just take 500 milligrams a day. It's not an ad. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just expressing that it's helping me so far. Plus, I have more energy. Not a lot, but I'm able to do more work now. And I have not had a horrible gut attack for 2 weeks since 2.5 weeks since I got these. So I'm very grateful, and my neighbor has noticed, and she told these homeowner people that I'm doing some better, and that they're not bothered at all what I'm doing or that I'm fixing up the house, but that it's taking me a while. They aren't bothered by the black planting pots. So, or the ladders that are out there. There's ladders just down on the ground leaning up against the house. But she came and she says, but he was taking pictures. He was out and back taking pictures. And she told me how they'd tried to get her to turn on me. She says, I will not do that. I'm your friend here. So, and I told her I was very grateful I am. She says, and I want to help you. Let's get those black pots hidden so it'll be one less thing, because she says they're really bugged by them. It's driving them nuts. And nobody else would. Who cares? But they live down the street. They don't even go by here, but they can watch me. They watch me from their house. It's creepy. And it was starting to freak me out because I've had a horrible life. I always have something going wrong. No matter where I live, it's always something. I'll have to do a part 2 on this. I've got to take this.